All right, well, I am joined now by Stephen Jones representing the Labor Party and Kelly O'Dwyer representing the Liberal Party. Thank you both for being here.
Great pleasure.
How on earth do you stand being in the nation's capital half the year? It's freezing.
It's cold now.
It's a terrible place to be.
Love Canberra, but getting home is always a blessing.
Ah, yes, no, right thing by the wife and kids there. Honestly, though, coming to Canberra, why was this particular place not just set up on the fringe of Sydney? It was because of Melbourne. You're a Melbourne person.
Well, no, it was originally in Melbourne.
It was because of Melbourne's inferiority complex about Sydney.
No. It's actually Sydney's inferiority complex about Melbourne, because it was in Melbourne. So it was the Sydney-siders who really mucked all of this up.
No,
so
Melbourne was the sort of 20 that they had before setting up Canberra. So yeah. Constitution had to be halfway between Sydney and Melbourne. Bathurst was ruled out.
Bloody cold here. But anyway, all right, let's get on to the issues. You guys are distracting me now. All right, paid parental leave. Let's start with that. It's not the issue of the day, but I always like asking you about it, Kelly O'Dwyer. You're a passionate advocate for this policy?
Indeed.
Really?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the launch of the PPL scheme during the last election was in my electorate of Higgins. It's all
disappointed that it was cut down from 150 to 100?
Well, it's all about, having the right balance, and we believe it's important.
So the balance was wrong before, but you've got it right now.
We believe, and the Prime Minister has articulated on many, many occasions, that he believes very strongly in making sure that women are paid their replacement wage rather than simply the minimum wage. And that's what we would expect in every other area.
Because it's a workplace entitlement, not a welfare entitlement.
That's right.
But it's still part of the age of entitlement, just in the workplace.
Well, no. We actually believe that this is going to be an area that will help boost productivity and will help encourage women back into the workforce, because it will connect women better into the workforce. And we believe it also is very good for small business. And I think this is a point that's often lost in this debate.
So let's not expand it now, because then I'm giving you too much time. Stephen Jones, let me come to you. No. Public service background, public sector union, I should say, correct?
Yep.
Your members in that particular jurisdiction have long had very generous paid parental leave schemes. Why not extend it to people outside of that particular discipline?
When Gough Whitlam and Clyde Cameron introduced paid maternity leave in 1974, that was exactly what they proposed to do, to see the public sector be an example, if you like, on paid maternity leave, on annual leave, on long service leave, and a whole range of other options. And I'll get to that in a moment, Kelly. If you don't block me, mate, I won't block you. And it didn't flow through the rest of the economy as quickly as people had hoped. When we came back into the government, we had a look at this through the Productivity Commission. I actually argued for an advance, a significant advance in paid maternity leave, because I thought it was the right thing to do. So I'm also a passionate believer in extending paid maternity leave. But there is a key difference between an employer paying something as a workplace entitlement, then when the employer does it, it should be at replacement wages, and the government and the taxpayers of Australia
paying those
entitlements to.
But we don't pay public service minimum wage.
No. Well, if the Prime Minister's argument is we're going to give Australians the same benefit as public servants earn, is he going to give them 15% superannuation as well? And
I've made that point as well. That's not a bad point.
All of the other public service conditions to the private sector as well. Because
in fact, one of your colleagues made that point to me, that I'd left that argument out in various things I've written on this.
A few issues on his hand.
How very helpful of my colleague.
The cut-through point is this: when the government sees a woman having a baby, the government is not able to say your baby and your maternity leave is worth more because you're paid more than you if you're on a lower wage.
Yeah.
We've got to treat everybody the same when we're handing out a government benefit.
So this is what we're talking about with small business and big business. And this was the point that I was making before. And that is that, we think it's important that women have the same opportunities whether they work in small business, whether they work in the public service, or whether they work in big business. And that's why the Prime Minister has argued so strongly for a paid parental leave scheme.
And he had a policy problem with women.
Takes that into account. Look, he doesn't have a problem with women. I know.
Oh no, he doesn't. But women have a problem with him. I mean, that's quite obvious by the polls.
Well, look, I'm not a commentator.
They're not on their own, Peter. They're not on their own. The simple point is this: when the government hands out a benefit, there shouldn't be discriminating between high-paid women and low-paid women. We should be providing everyone with the same benefit.
We discriminate all the time, though, with means testing.
And that's what Labor's benefit.
But we discriminate all the time with means testing.
Yeah, for different purposes. You means test for different purposes. When we're handing out a paid maternity leave scheme, everyone should get the same.
All right, let's get on to another issue and talk about co-payments. I had a discussion in this very studio, in this horrible place that is Canberra, with the Health Minister, Peter Dutton, last night. Co-payments, I find it a fascinating area. Let me start with you, Stephen Jones. Just answer me this. It's often raised by the coalition in the current context of the debate that Hawke, Jenny Macklin, Andrew Lee in an academic paper have at various times argued for co-payments on visiting a GP. What's different now that it's the Liberal Party arguing for it?
Yeah, Hawke did. That's a matter of historical record. Didn't end so well.
Was that really the reason?
Yeah, that was one of the key reasons. Jenny Macklin is also on the record as saying she never advocated for this policy.
Not personally, but she did as part of that report.
She never advocated as a part of this policy. Andrew Lee, as a young university student, hell, Pete, if you and I were held accountable for everything that we did at university, or if Tony Abbott...
This was 10 years ago. He wasn't that young.
Kelly, if Tony Abbott or Joe Hockey were held accountable for everything that they did at university, Parliament would be a fun old place.
But you want, in fairness...
At least Andrew Lee was doing something useful. He wasn't punching walls, he was writing books when he was at university.
And,
you know, he's been an academic his whole career.
Frankly,
so it's not quite the same as the 18-year-old university student.
Look, mate, it's the wrong policy for Australia. Doctors are panning it, the public is panning it, and that is the issue. We can dredge through ancient history, but it's the wrong policy.
But here's the thing.
It's the wrong policy for Australia.
The major point is this, right? Let's just throw Hawke, Jenny Macklin and Andrew Lee all under a bus together.
I like Jenny and Andrew, and I like Bob too.
I was wondering where you were going to stop there. But the reason I say that is because it doesn't matter that they advocated. If it's not a good policy, it doesn't matter who's been behind it at different points over time.
No,
the problem with the policy is that the medical community, almost writ large, thinks that this is a difficulty because of what it does as discouraging people going to a doctor. It is about sending a price signal. And from a preventative health perspective, they worry about it.
So I think the point to make about the historical point, and it's not that far back in history, let me say, particularly with respect to Andrew Lee, it was something like, 10 years ago. He was still at university, but he wasn't academic.
He was wrong.
He wasn't academic. And he has argued very strongly for it in university papers and in books that he's published. So I think...
But he's argued for a lot of other things you don't agree with.
Yeah, he's put some thought into it. No, but the point I make there in respect to that is that, the Labor Party are really hypocritical on this. I mean, the Labor Party, of course, has also supported at various times changes to the PBS such that we actually ask people to make a contribution to their health care through their medicines. And what we're saying is we don't think it's right when we've got huge increasing costs in health care.
Okay, well, let me jump in on that. Let me jump in on that and get a response to that, because that is not... It sounds like a fair response. Is it or not?
Yeah, look, instead of reading Andrew Lee's books, your health minister should be reading some of the history books on the PBS, and I could recommend a few. First introduced in 1948 by Chifley, no co-payments. The co-payments, first introduced by the Menzies government in 1960 at 5 shillings in old coin. When we came into government in the 1980s, we introduced the safety net because we could see that the cost of the PBS was going up and up and up. We kept the safety net, and we then also put in place the pharmaceutical allowance in the pension scheme. So far from being the barrackers for the PBS co-payments, we've looked at it and said, well, it's in there. What we are going to do is put a safety net in there and compensate pensioners and healthcare card owners for the impacts.
And there is a difference.
Far from being the architects of it, your guy was the architect of it.
You're always complaining about not getting a fair share. I reckon on time allocation, you speak more than your counterpart almost every time.
And you jacked it up, and what we've done is compensate pensioners for it. So the analogy does not work.
Kelly O'Dwyer, the biggest issue though with it...
I've got the conch now, do I?
The biggest issue with it is that it should be coming in after the first 10 visits for pensioners and concession card holders, not kick out after the first 10 visits. I think it's perfectly reasonable to have some form of co-payment at some level. However, it has to have some exclusions for pensioners and co-payments and concession card holders.
And
surely.
It does.
Only once they do 10 visits.
After those 10 visits. And look, that's maximum $70 a year in terms of contribution.
It's a lot to a pensioner, and it could be enough for them not to go to a doctor.
And for children under 16, as well.
What's the purpose of the policy?
So the purpose of the policy is that there is a level of price signal in this.
So you think people are going to the doctors to read, backdated copies of Woman's Weekly because they're bored? People go to the doctor because they're sick, not because they're bored.
But there must be some people that go, if there's no cost to go, then there's no reason not to bother.
But let me make this point. Well, can I just make one quick point?
Go for it, Kel.
And that is that there are, and there have been many cases of this, where people who have the capacity to contribute to their health costs are going to bulk billing doctors, and they are effectively making the taxpayer pay for their health care when they have a capacity to contribute. Now, I'm not just talking here about people that you've been mentioning before with respect to pensioners, but we're talking about people who are quite wealthy people who are able to make a contribution, who are going to bulk billing doctors. Now,
Not many,
there are a lot of other people.
Are there many?
Yeah, absolutely. I was hearing only the other day about a public service retired public servant because actually, if you want to keep it universal, if you actually genuinely want people who are the most vulnerable,
don't just make it for everyone.
No. If you genuinely want it to be universal for everybody in perpetuity, which means the most vulnerable people getting access to healthcare, you have to make it sustainable.
Let me ask a question of both of you then. This is something that neither side are looking at. Why not bake into the tax system the Medicare levy and then just simply make bulk billing a means-tested thing?
But the Medicare levy only covers part of the cost.
But that's what I'm saying, just bake it into the tax system and then means test.
It's a very small
means test
proportion.
visiting a doctor.
And it's a misnomer. The Medicare levy, the Labor Party would like to pretend this covers healthcare costs. It doesn't. It's only about 20%.
But this is probably a question for you, Stephen Jones. Why have universal healthcare? Why not have means-tested healthcare so that we have a safety net?
Because I think that healthcare should be a universal right for all Australian citizens. It shouldn't be based on your postcode. It should be something that we all enjoy as Australian citizens, and it's working. You know what? It's working. We pay one of the lowest percentages of GDP in healthcare costs. We get more for less in Australia than all of those other countries in the world that have the user pay system with a very low safety net for the very poor. We do better for less in Australia. Why muck it up? And what the Libs are proposing to do is muck it up with this crazy notion that nobody supports about putting in a price signal based on this shonky report that they got the Commission of Audit to do. The guy couldn't even read the right column. He said that Australians were visiting a doctor on average 11 times a year. 6 times a year. The basis was wrong.
We're right out of time, and I've got to say, it's been a very smooth night tonight. My producer James is on holidays. Obviously, it's a shame not to have him there, but no one in my ear telling me to end it. We've had an open, free-ranging conversation. It's been great to have you both on the program. Kelly O'Dwyer, Stephen Jones, thanks for your company.